These are 5 signs that it's time to run away from a toxic relationship. Yeah, God, so I've been feeling really depressed, stuck in this relationship with a person who just seems to be really toxic, but I just keep loving them, thinking that's what you want me to do, but I'm feeling depressed and lonely. I'm just like wondering if there are any signs that I should look for, when is too much, what's too toxic. So if you can just give me a call back. And for my Bible-only Christians, I will have verses for every single one of the toxic traits.
The first sign that you are dealing with a toxic person is that they say, I'm sorry, but they don't change. There's this phrase that says, sorry is as sorry does. But if they don't do anything, then they're not actually sorry. So maybe they keep saying, I'm sorry I cheated on you. I'm sorry that I overlooked what you said. I'm sorry that I forgot to call you. I'm sorry that I forgot to invite you to hang out with me like for the last 10 times and you've had to do all the asking. Well, until they're actually ready to change and to let their character match up with their words, they aren't actually sorry, because what they are doing is showing you that they're not really sorry. And they're saying it to make themselves feel better, or to make you feel better, or to get out of taking responsibility. Being sorry and actually doing something about it is what real health and emotional maturity is. The Bible talks about this as repentance, which means to turn around and go the other direction. So if one way was hurting you or mistreating you, and you confront them and then they say, I'm sorry, and then they will strive to not let those behaviors that impacted you happen again. If someone has been an addict for the last 10 years and you say, you know what, I've had it, it's time for you to stop drinking alcohol or be able to only have one drink at a party and not be able to not drink the whole entire bottle. Well, if they have habituated in nature for 10 years, drinking alcohol every single day, a bottle or whatever, they're not going to automatically be able to adjust to your level of what is healthy. They need to probably go through rehab or detox. And so it's important to have realistic goals about what change actually needs to take place, but set up boundaries that are appropriate and not just enable or give in with no change or no accountability. History will always repeat itself unless there's a variable change. So if a person says they're sorry and they keep doing it and they don't make any changes, then you need to trust them that they are actually who they are showing you to be.
Matthew 7:15-20. It says this: Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but they are vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, the way that they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every time the tree, okay, you get the point. So basically, if they say they're doing something and then they don't do it, then we're going to look at, ooh, this is a pattern here. And if they aren't with humility looking at what needs to change and getting the right help, they're probably going to continue to hurt you, and so you're in a toxic dynamic.
The second sign is that you feel constantly disregarded and treated with disrespect and not valued as a person. If you are constantly minimized, criticized, or you're not listened to, or they don't ask you what your opinion or what your life is about, and they constantly talk about themselves, or they use you as a function, these are signs of somebody who is toxic and self-absorbed, or they're so insecure themselves that they have to minimize you because they don't feel loved themselves. And so your job is not to save or heal their inner child. That's their own work with the Lord and a therapist and someone that they trust if they're ready to open up and deal with those wounds. But if they're constantly disrespecting you, then they are not honoring the image of God inside of you and inside of themselves. Jesus says that the greatest love is somebody who lays down his life for his friends. So if somebody is steamrolling over their friends or over their child or parent or spouse or whatever, then they're not actually loving them. Then there's something going on within their soul that doesn't open up to the love of God, that's continuing to hash out this dysfunction and this venom that is affecting you. We're called to love our neighbor as ourself. If they treat you like that, they probably treat themselves like that. But is that the kind of relationship that God has called you to be in? Is that the kind of person he wants you to be? Is somebody who disregards somebody else? Then it's important for us to be around people that influence us, that are actually going to hold us in high regard, respect, care, and be kind to us. I'm not talking about occasionally something happens. If you're married, especially, you know that we all have things that sometimes our spouse is like our worst enemy. And it is good to overlook an offense once in a while. But if they are constantly like that and it's chronic, then you have somebody who doesn't respect and love themselves. They're never going to be able to respect and love you back. Proverbs 13:30 says this, "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." So if somebody is disrespecting you or disregarding you, they have a lot of anger issues. Now, we all have anger. It's okay to be angry sometimes and actually to experience that in relationship. But if somebody continues to treat you poorly and put you down, then they are going to teach you how to do that. You will become like them if they do that. So don't go with somebody who is sowing a character of anger and wrath, because it will start affecting you.
A good way to test this is to say, if I were really healthy, would I treat somebody this way? Would I love them this way? And if the answer is no, unless you're the toxic person, then I might say it's time to go.
The third sign is that they have a bad character and it is actually rubbing off on you. You are called to walk in God's Spirit. As you spend more time with Jesus, you'll become more like him, because that's how we grow into the types of people that can do God's will, as we are around people that are doing God's will, that are emulating good qualities that God has ordained as healthy and life-giving. If you're around somebody that has a character that is really fractured, or that they have habituated a nature that is very toxic, if you're around somebody who is making poor choices and who is continually finding themselves in trouble and not taking responsibility for that and not making necessary changes, then that is going to have a negative impact on your life. And therefore, you are not going to be able to become more like Christ. And as Ephesians 5:1 says, be imitators of Christ. So it's important to have people that are wise, people who have good characters. Here are some verses about how bad character affects our walk with God. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Psalm 1, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but those who delight in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water." Proverbs 13:20, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." The fourth sign that God's telling you this person's toxic is that you feel mental clutter in your mind about whether you should stay in a relationship with them. You do it out of guilt. You're feeling like, I have to do this because they're my mom, they're my cousin, or they're my longtime friend, or they're my coworker, and I need to be, in relationship with them. But you don't need to have them in your circle of trust if they keep breaking your trust, or if you are being friends with them out of obligation versus you feel free to love them and they love you back, and then it's a mutual reciprocal relationship. There may be seasons where God calls you to bear one another's burdens and walk with them, but he's going to give you resources and a sense of calling and invitation to do that. God never demands that we do stuff. He invites us. And so if you are feeling like you have to be in a relationship with this person and you feel drained spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically even, and it's taking the life out of you as opposed to giving you life, and God will give you life to walk with people even if things are hard. It's not about whether someone makes you feel happy all the time, but what it is about is listening to God, and does he want you to be in relationship with this person? And if it's where you're just giving because he's doing something in you, that's one thing. But if you are having a friendship that's draining you, a relationship even with your mom or your parent, and it's hurting your relationship with yourself, God, and others, then it's toxic and it's time to get out.
Now, of course, there are some people where you do stay in relationship with because they mean a lot to you and you just go with it and you overlook an offense. There are times when you are supposed to just overlook an offense. That is different. But when somebody chronically or continually does not respect or care about you, then you are enabling their bad behavior. You are actually part of the problem. You're part of feeding into this toxicity, because if they're being toxic to you, they're being toxic to other people. And if that's not how God has created us to be, which is to be loving, to listen to one another, to be there for one another, and we just let them do that, they're gonna walk on other people too. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, because it is the wellspring of life. So being in a relationship that continually hurts you is not guarding your heart and caring for the responsibility of your soul and learning to love God with your whole heart and mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself in this equation, it's not love, it's actually oppression. The fifth sign is they continually lie to themselves and lie to you, and they are completely detached from reality. This person could be someone like that's gaslighting you, or that you feel like you need to record the conversation because what you thought you said and what they thought they said is completely different, and they'll deny reality, like, oh, that didn't happen. Or maybe they say they're gonna do something and they don't follow through, and then you say, hey, you said you were gonna do this. They have excuse after excuse, or they say, well, I really can't do that because of this, and they justify it, and it's constant. I had a friend once who was getting out of a really nasty, like, abusive relationship, and she made a promise to herself, and she kept talking about how she's gonna go to therapy and work on these issues. I was like, yeah, go for you. And she ended up just getting on dating apps instead, and was constantly lying to herself about needing to deal with the fact that she chose a person that was pretty unhealthy and that she had some codependent tendencies. She wouldn't work on it. She would constantly make up these stories justifying why she's doing what she's doing. And then she got into another bad relationship, and then another bad relationship. Just kept getting like a bigger and bigger lie, where more and more I just wasn't dealing with a real person anymore. There wasn't a real honesty or real awareness of how her choices were impacting her and also impacting me. I had to set boundaries and say, you know what, if you're not going to get some help, I'm with you in this. You're not seeing the truth of what's going on. So there's this constant resistance to looking at the truth of how this person's choices, what they're saying, and what they're doing is not matching up, especially when it's directed at you and a person has more of a mean spirit or they're a little more angry. If you're in a person's life and they're not engaged in reality, which is where the Lord dwells, He dwells in reality in the present moment. If they can't live in reality and acknowledge the truth of what's going on in their own life, and they're not going to be able to then be honest about what's going on in your life. You're not going to have iron sharpening iron, because they're not even going to be dealing with iron, because they're going to be like making up their own like reality of what something is. And that is going to keep you from engaging in God's presence. It's going to keep you from thriving, because you're going to be constantly second guessing and then not being able to trust what they say. You can't have a deep relationship without trust. You need to be able to feel like you can rely on them and they can rely on you. Trustability and trustworthiness. If a person doesn't have that, you're dealing with a toxic person. And to have an interpersonal, interdependent relationship, which is what I believe God calls us to in our healthy inner circles, not just where God tells us to love our enemies, but you're not going to be best friends with your enemy or hang out with them so you can become like them, right? You want to be able to be with people who are wise and walking with them, and so that you can become more wise and walk by the Spirit, people that are walking in the Spirit. Let me know in the comments below what toxic traits that you have noticed, whether that's narcissism, gaslighting. Let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with that. I really encourage you to go to prayer. Maybe get a piece of paper and write down all of the names of your relationships and really just spend some time praying over them. Lord, do you want me to be open to this person or not? Is this somebody you're calling me to continue to walk with, Lord, or are they distracting and distracting me from pursuing you more fully? Do I feel put down or hurt in this relationship? How do I need to grow in myself so that I can be able to be attracted and attract the right type of people that are healthy? How am I being codependent? Because we choose the relationships we have based on how we've grown up, our parents, our formation, all those things. It's really important to be able to take responsibility for how we're engaging in these relationships, and we're enabling or being codependent as these people are continuing to live out these habits. And maybe we have some fear around setting boundaries. Maybe we need to learn how to stand up for ourselves, or we don't really feel love, so we need to get in spiritual direction or therapy or something like that. So if that's you, I have a free course on how to create a rule of life, which is going to help you create habits and rhythms to help you flourish and grow closer to God. I also have a link down below. Email me if you want to maybe think about having spiritual direction. I will see you in the next video.